Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Excuses for Friday, but I was attending a TICAD function and stayed on because it was extremely interesting. Let me start off with a photograph of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe arriving in Kenya for the TICAD conference on African development. That photograph was posted by the government of Japan. Macro thoughts: dollar whipsawed as traders sought through Yellen's speech, and it was actually in areas in contradiction of itself, talking about a neutral rate of 0% at the same time saying the conditions were right for a tightening. It's still not clear to me whether they tighten once or twice this year. If they don't tighten in September, I expect a quarter point in December. The carry trade is on pace for its biggest annual gain since 2012, according to Deutsche Bank AG data. Have a look at this. Probably the signal to sell it now. The carry trade is one where investors borrow in a group of 10 currencies with low interest rates and use the proceeds to buy assets with higher yields. Is on pace for its biggest annual gain since 2012. Then take a look at this, which is the Bank of Japan's balance sheet explosion and the fact that it's not helping ward off deflation. Home thoughts: between the vision and its implementation, there are numerous challenges to be met. That's Andre Borschberg, who did the solar flight across the world. I attended the TICAD conference, and Serendipity was the Kenya International Conference Center. I met Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, caught up with President Museveni, the President of the African Development Bank, Adesina, President Nyusi of Mozambique, amongst others. And I'm grateful for being able to get my little elevator pitch to Prime Minister Abe. I told him about the Nyali Bridge, which was built by the Japanese many years ago, and the fact that I worked for Sumitomo Bank. I like this quote from Robin Sharma: sometimes it looks like your dreams won't come true, but that's just because better ones are on their way. And this photograph of President Bill Clinton and the next President Hillary Clinton on their wedding day. Pretty powerful photograph, I thought. Political reflections: Japan bears the responsibility of fostering the confluence of the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. So said Shinzo Abe. And in my piece over the weekend, I said, so I do foresee Japan alongside the US and India seeking to contain and triangulate China in the Indian Ocean, and he was putting it in a more delicate fashion. This photograph from Die Welt caught my attention. Und es gibt ihn noch, den guten Tatot. When I looked at the translation, it didn't really chime with the photograph. You can tell me if it does or not. Both sides in Gabon are claiming presidential victory, which is always a recipe for a disaster, especially if it's a close-run thing, which looks like it was in Gabon. Ping distributed figures showing him easily beating the incumbent Ali Bongo Ondimba in Saturday's vote. The general trends indicate we are the winner of this important presidential election, Ping told reporters, and a large crowd of cheering supporters gathered at his campaign headquarters in the capital, Libreville. Despite numerous irregularities, you managed to thwart this regime's congenital traps of fraud, he said. Bongo, who's 57, first won election after his father Omar died in 2009 after 42 years as president. Has benefited from the power of incumbency as well as patronage system lubricated by oil largesse. However, hours before Ping's announcement, Bongo's spokesman made a similar declaration claiming that the president was poised to win another term in office. It's always a dangerous moment when it's a closely run election in Africa. President Ali Bongo was seeking to be a brand new man, according to a report in Agence France Presse, known variously by his initials ABO, Ali B, and the less flattering Monsieur Phi, for succeeding his father, who ruled Gabon for 40 years. There is a whole Bertha controversy about him as well. I like this photograph of Jabhat Zarif and in Venezuela, Sam Madani, who I follow, and he's very good on the oil market, says Zarif is just too cute for his own good, indeed. Andy Borowitz, who's a bit tongue-in-cheek in the New Yorker, says, Pence recaptured after fleeing Trump campaign bus, calling it a scary moment and a close call. Donald Trump's campaign officials confirmed that they had recaptured Mike Pence after the Indiana governor attempted to flee the campaign bus in the early hours of Friday morning. According to the campaign, Pence had asked to stop at McDonald's in rural Virginia so that he could use the bathroom, but aides grew concerned when the governor failed to reappear after 20 minutes after determining that Pence had given them the slip. Trump staffers fanned out across the Virginia backcountry where the governor was believed to have fled. News that Pence had vanished touched off a panic in Indiana where residents feared he might not return to resume his political career. After 45 minutes of searching, however, campaign officials located a bedraggled and dazed Pence walking along Virginia State Route 287, where the Republican vice presidential nominee was attempting unsuccessfully to hitch a ride. A confrontation that Trump aides characterized as tense ensued, after which a sobbing Pence returned to the bus. Borowitz is very irreverent, isn't he? Reportedly, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie offered to fill in for Pence in the event that he became unable to fulfill his duties. The offer was declined. Ha ha. International markets, the pound had its best run since the Brexit vote last week. Have a look at this from Bloomberg. I'll put up a one-year chart. We've slipped off a bit below 131, but I'm a buyer above with a stop just above around 127.50. Let's have a look at the other currencies. Euro, dollar, 111.82, dollar index 95.48, Japanese yen 102.23, Swissy 0.9772, the pound 113.93, Aussie, let's take a look where that is, 0.7546, India rupee 67.15, South Korean won 11.2320, the Real 326.49, Egyptian pound 887.29, the rand has blown right out. Last I checked, 14.42. Dollar index, I'll put up a one-year chart for you. I still think 93 is the key area that we've got to keep an eye on, and I think it's going to hold for now. But, if we were looking for clarity, we've hardly got it. Gold, 13.19, I think last. Let me put up a 6-month chart. Key area of support for this is 13.05 to 13.10. Crude oil is not having a good morning. That's down dramatically. Have a look at the 6-month chart. I don't see an output freeze or anything that's bullish for the price coming out of this latest OPEC meeting at all. So I expect a return to around the 40 level. Mexico is seen as less creditworthy than its peers, Peru, as well as lower rated Panama. This is just about credit default swaps. Sub-Saharan Africa, Japan looks to boost trade with Africa, as the report in the FT. For many years, the motorcycles on the streets of Dar es Salaam were almost exclusively Japanese. Now it is hard to find a Japanese model, and most are at least 5 years old. They're being driven out by the Chinese, said Caroline Muzapi, a resident of Tanzania's capital. The Chinese bikes are often less than half the price, but people don't mind. If they don't last as long, they'll just buy another, still save money. Such trends are largely the result of Beijing's aggressive approach to capturing African markets as it has flooded the continent with affordable goods. Mr. Abe arrived in Nairobi this week accompanied by 75 business leaders to launch the 6th TICAD conference. Japan will work hand in hand with Africa to realize the African dream. This is exactly what TICAD is all about. Have a look at the article on Rich Wrap-Ups. It's an article in the Financial Times. My piece over the weekend about TICAD, saying it was the first time ever held in Africa since 1993, and that's a big deal. Abe said, at long last and exactly as promised, TICAD has come to Africa. I must admit, I get kind of intoxicated at these big set-piece events, because I believe serendipity can be shaped. Being in the right place at the right time is not a new concept. While chance is an intrinsic element of serendipity, I believe that you can significantly alter the probability and quality of the unexpected encounters in our lives. So with that in mind, I intercepted the Prime Minister, Super Mario Shinzo Abe, and told him how I worked at Sumitomo Bank and how the Japanese had built the Nyali Bridge in my hometown of Mombasa, and my two good friends then were Yoichiro and Daichiro Sakamoto. I met with President Museveni and said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And then he had to, of course. I made a bold promise to President Nyusi, and they've already emailed me actually. Caught up with the President of the African Development Bank, and more, all in the space of a few short hours. It's not very often that such environments are found. And kudos to the organizers, the governments of Japan and Kenya. Japanese Prime Minister pledged $30 billion over the next 3 years and said, "Throughout the continent, I cannot but think we are witnessing a quantum leap. This is an investment that has faith in Africa's future," he said. "Let us advance together, Africa and Japan. The future abounds with blazes of bright colors." Quite lyrical. Japan, of course, trails China, which recorded total trade with Africa of about $179 billion versus Japan's approximately $24 billion. And given the level of geopolitical contestation between the two, a lot of commentary tends to be seen through that prism of geopolitical competition. Japan does not need to compete in every country in Africa because for China the votes of the UN are critical, whereas for Japan, UN votes do not carry the same import. So I expect Japan to pick its African spots, and if you think about it, the Indian Ocean is an appendage of the South China Sea. The Prime Minister said Japan bears the responsibility of fostering the confluence of the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. So I do foresee Japan alongside the US and India seeking to contain and triangulate China in the Indian Ocean. Another issue post-Fukushima is Japan's energy security. Here too I expect Japan to seek a serious foothold in the nascent East African energy supplies which run from Mozambique through Tanzania to Kenya and inland. Japan's energy security is a key issue. Interestingly, if you look at the Japanese investments, they are concentrated in energy, ports, logistics, and what I would call choke points. What I've found is that once Japan Inc. makes the decision, and it can be frustrating getting to that decision point, they are all in. The president of the World Bank, Jim Yong Kim, said his message to investors at TICAD 6 is get in on the deal now, invest in Africa. The Japanese have, in my opinion, made the decision to get in on the deal now. That can only be a good thing for Africa. Let us advance together, Africa and Japan. The future abounds with blazes of bright colors. Jim Yong Kim's message to investors at TICAD, get in on the deal now, invest in Africa. Pledging $30 billion by 2018. President Mugabe, and I'll put up a little clip of him at the conference. No Arab Spring in Zimbabwe, Mugabe warns protesters. Zimbabwean police fired tear gas and water cannon at opposition leaders and hundreds of demonstrators at a protest against Mugabe. Mugabe accused Western countries, including the United States, of sponsoring the protests. They are fighting because of the Americans, he said. However, in my view, spring is in the air in Zimbabwe. It's spreading geographically and in intensity, and at some point it hits a tipping point. This is an extraordinary show of unity, and it shows that Mugabe's divide and conquer policy, a tactic he picked up from his country's British colonizers, is failing. Put up a little video clip for you to watch of President Mugabe when he was making his comments at the TICAD conference. I was moderating a discussion with Bob Collymore, Joshua, amongst others, McKinsey, and Joshua said the young population are more upbeat and confident to drive entrepreneurship and economic growth. South Africa's rand had its biggest weekly drop since May, this is as stories start to swirl about Gordon's position. South African oil shares up 5.55% this year. Dollar versus rand, have a look at this, we're back heading towards 15 in my view. Gexit, not so fast. Gupta's, this is Daily Maverick. Should number one's BFFs be allowed to unbundle and leave South Africa before the public protector or the Hawks have completed investigations into the family's alleged widespread state capture? ANC alliance partner COSATU said the governing party was riven by factions and had been captured by looters, criminals, flatterers, patrons, factionalists and hangers-on. So that about sums it up. Egyptian EGX30 up 14.93% this year. Nigeria's Naira hit a record low of 412 to the dollar on the parallel market. President Buhari was not sitting too far away from me, and he cannot be a pound more than £140 in my view. Nigerian all-share down 4.16% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 9.34% this year. Throughout the continent, I cannot think we are witnessing a quantum leap. Prime Minister Abe. Jim Yong Kim, I believe Africa can. I like this photograph filming in abandoned Roman Cathedral Church in Mogadishu, Somalia. And this photograph as well, flamingos feed in the water of Walvis Bay by D. Miller. Let's move on to Kenya. We've got plenty to talk about. Kenya's seaside looks peaceful, but a murderous war is being waged. This is in The Guardian. A football field and a grove of mango trees lie between Bongwe and its neighbouring village. On one side lived the family of 33-year-old Subira Mongole, shot dead by gunmen while watching television with friends one evening in May. On the other live his alleged murderers. Interesting story. We know there have been problems there, lots of unhappiness. And as I've said previously, well, in 2012, the Swahili coast is a potential tinderbox from Lamu through Zanzibar. Nairobi all-share is down 7.36% this year. It has tanked 7.85% since Wednesday night. Banking stock carnage at the bourse was my piece over the weekend. President Kenyatta signed into a law, a bill limiting how much interest banks can charge for loans and the minimum they can pay on deposits on Wednesday. The notice was received after the Nairobi Securities Exchange had been shuttered on that day. Kenya, which in fact eliminated interest rate limits in July 1991, voted for an amendment to the Banking Act that would require lenders to pay credit costs at 400 basis points above the benchmark central bank rate. The law also compels financial institutions to pay interest of a minimum of 70% of the so-called CBR on deposits. I've consulted widely, and it is clear to me from those consultations that Kenyans are disappointed and frustrated with the lack of sensitivity by the financial sector, particularly banks, the President said. Of course, what was crystal clear is that even if the President sent the bill back, it would have boomeranged right back with a parliamentary supermajority. That was a political reality. My argument is not about the outcome. We all want lower borrowing rates, that's a given, but around the fact that we've used a sledgehammer to crack a nut. One of the key drivers of the recent October 2015 spike in interest rates was more about the government's borrowing appetite and the need for fiscal consolidation. Before Kenyatta signed the law, the IMF shared the Treasury's and the central bank's preference for use of other measures like fiscal consolidation to lower commercial lending rates over time. That explains the haste by some parliamentarians to find a shortcut. But unfortunately, from international experience, these shortcuts are never as effective as they look on the surface. This is Armando Morales, IMF. Therefore, my point is, let's not pop the champagne just yet, because I'm not sure there is a golden flood of liquidity at a price of 14.5% for all and sundry. Predictably, Thursday and Friday were 2 days of carnage at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. The NSE all-share crashed 7.85% lower over 2 sessions. The NSE 20 slumped 246.06 points and is now minus 20.4% year to date and in a bear market. Of course, banking stocks were at the bleeding edge of this downdraft. KCB, the biggest bank, retreated 17.55% Wednesday through Friday, and this morning is limit down again. Equity down 18.05% those 2 sessions, limit down again today. INM minus 18.69%, limit down as well. Co-op Bank 18.49% over 2 sessions. Barclays Bank down 11.855%. And they've just reported half-year results, and I'll come to that in a moment. Standard Chartered outperformed, down only 6.86%. Co-op Bank experienced its worst single-day drop ever, and the majority of shares have closed at multi-year lows. Through Thursday and Friday, there were millions of shares for sale at limit down. It is a very steep drop indeed. From a purely short-term trading perspective, higher frequency traders might consider buying today if the market opens down again Monday morning, which it's done. How do we navigate these choppy waters for the smaller banks who are unable to mobilize deposits in the retail market and operate in the wholesale markets? I would have thought we asked not for whom the bell tolls. Their deposit structure makes the corridor limit too difficult. Investors might analyze and pick those banks whose businesses fall most within the corridor versus those whose business falls outside the corridor. Those who are outside the corridor are the ones who are going to have to make the biggest and most surgical adjustments in their models. I call this a Schumpeter moment for banking a little while ago. I was talking about the digital advance. According to Schumpeter, the gale of creative destruction describes the process of industrial mutation that incessantly revolutionizes the economic structure from within. Incessantly destroying the old one, incessantly creating a new one. On Thursday and Friday, a gale of creative destruction blew through the banking sector. Barclays reported first half earnings per share declined 10.714%. Loans and advances ticked higher 14.787% to 153.3 billion, which was interesting. Dividend maintained unchanged. Profit before income tax down 9.513%. KCB, I put up links for this on Rich Wrap Up. KCB is down 17.55% through this morning. It's open. Equity down 18.05% since Wednesday through this morning's open. INM down 18.69% since Wednesday. Co-op down 18.49%. Standard Chartered outperforming it, down 6.86% because most of their business is in that corridor. Total Kenya has reported first half earnings per share up 37.349%, good result. EPS up 37.349%, gross sales down 23.749%, but they made that work for them with a big net profit gain. That was notwithstanding the fact that they had a provision, a big tax charge. Otherwise their earnings would have been even better. NSE 20 down 20.4% this year. I like this photograph of the opposition leader, Raila Odinga, from the Star. Entry of private equity company Kuramo to dilute Transcentury owners by 25% only, which means that Kuramo has agreed to acquire Transcentury shares at a 538% premium to the current market price, which seems to me a very strange outcome. Once again, or a generous one. Thank you for stopping by.